Imagine this. You sit down in a quiet room, no music, no phone, no conversation, just you and silence. Within seconds, you feel the itch. Maybe it's your phone. Maybe it's a sudden need to check email. Maybe it's a snack you're not even hungry for. Anything to escape the stillness. Anything to avoid being alone with your own mind. Why? Why does stillness feel so unbearable? In an age where infinite information is just a thumb swipe away, where dopamine drips into our brains with every notification and scroll, we've become allergic to silence, to presence, to boredom. We no longer choose distraction. We need it. It is the drug of our time, and we are all hooked. But this addiction isn't just about social media, streaming platforms, or the pull of entertainment. It's deeper. It's existential. You reach for your phone, not because you want to, but because you can't bear not to. Underneath that impulse lies a profound psychological avoidance, an unwillingness to face the self in its raw, unfiltered form. You don't fear boredom. You fear what boredom reveals. There is something ancient in this discomfort, an echo from your unconscious. And like all unconscious patterns, it remains hidden until you're forced to see it. But what if distraction isn't the disease but the symptom? What if every compulsive urge to escape is really an alarm bell? An unconscious scream signaling that something inside you remains unresolved, unloved, unseen? What if the more stimulated you are, the further you are from who you truly are? This isn't just about phones, notifications, or endless scrolling. It's about the terror of unmasking. Because when everything goes silent, the truth gets loud. And the truth is this: many people would rather suffer the anxiety of overstimulation than confront the emptiness that lives just beneath it. A void they've carried for years. A question they've never dared ask. What is it you're running from when you scroll late into the night? What pain are you numbing when you binge hours of content without remembering a moment of it? What truth are you avoiding when you fill your every quiet moment with noise? Carl Jung once said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls." And isn't that what modern distraction truly is? A sophisticated, socially sanctioned form of soul avoidance. But here's the paradox. The very thing we avoid, presence, stillness, introspection, is the only thing that can heal us. The cure and the cause entangled. In a world screaming for your attention, choosing silence is an act of rebellion. And yet silence is the one thing we fear most. Because it strips us naked. It demands vulnerability. It asks us to see ourselves without filter, without distraction, without illusion. So the real question is not, why are we so distracted? The real question is, what have we buried so deeply that distraction became our only refuge? In the next chapter, we'll go deeper beneath the noise, behind the screens, into the psychological architecture that makes distraction so seductive. We'll uncover how trauma, identity, and modern culture conspire to keep us dependent on stimulation, and what that reveals about the nature of the self. Because the moment you can no longer sit alone with your thoughts is the moment you've lost sovereignty over your mind. And without sovereignty, who are you? The impulse to distract is not new. Ancient minds, long before smartphones and digital dopamine, spoke of it in different forms. Restlessness, acedia, spiritual emptiness. What's changed isn't the human psyche. What's changed is the world's ability to exploit it. Distraction isn't just a byproduct of modernity, it's the architecture of it. But to truly understand why you can't stop reaching for that next hit of stimulation, you have to go deeper than apps and algorithms. You have to go inward into the structure of the self itself. At the root of distraction is disconnection, from presence, from inner stillness, from pain, from truth, but even deeper from identity. And here's where psychology and philosophy intertwine. The fragmented self, a Jungian perspective. Carl Jung believed that the psyche is made of opposing forces, the conscious ego, the unconscious shadow, the anima and animus, the self. The shadow is the part of us we refuse to see, banish into the dark and then forget. But it never forgets us. Every distraction is a diversion from the confrontation with the shadow. When the unconscious shadow becomes too heavy, filled with shame, guilt, unresolved trauma, it threatens the ego's stability. And so the psyche defends itself, not with awareness, but with avoidance. Distraction becomes a psychological defense mechanism. a barrier between you and what you're afraid to remember. This avoidance takes many forms: compulsively checking your phone, working without pause, binging series that blur into each other, scrolling through social feeds that never satisfy. These are not failures of willpower, they are symptoms of a deeper psychological repression. You are not lazy, you are protecting yourself, but from what? The Sartrean dilemma: freedom as a burden. Jean-Paul Sartre, the French existentialist, proposed that human beings are condemned to be free. That is, we have no choice but to choose. And in that infinite freedom lies the terror of responsibility, the burden of creating meaning, of facing the absurd, so we escape it. Distraction becomes a way of outsourcing the responsibility of existence. Rather than forging your own meaning, you consume what others have made. Instead of reflecting on your mortality, you scroll through lives curated for envy. Instead of confronting freedom, you numb it. And yet, this avoidance leads to an existential anxiety, a low-grade dread that hums beneath every scroll, every binge, every wasted hour. You feel it in the quiet moments, like a ghost you almost remember. You can't name it, but it's always there. This anxiety is not caused by distraction. Distraction is the drug. The anxiety is the withdrawal from truth. Schopenhauer's cycle: will, desire, and dissatisfaction. Arthur Schopenhauer argued that life is driven by an insatiable will, a blind, restless striving that can never be satisfied. The moment we attain something, the joy fades, and desire is reborn. Satisfaction is fleeting, suffering is constant. Modern distraction follows this same pattern. You reach for your phone, dopamine spikes, a moment of pleasure, then nothing, then the next urge, the next scroll, the next video, endlessly repeating, like a prisoner pacing a digital cell. Schopenhauer would say you are not addicted to your phone, you are addicted to willing, to the constant, unrelenting desire to escape what is. And here's the paradox: the more you stimulate the will, the less peace you find. The Huxleyan trap: pleasure as control. Aldous Huxley, in Brave New World, warned of a future not ruled by oppression, but by pleasure. Not with chains, but with endless entertainment. A society so sedated by comfort, it forgets how to suffer, and thus forgets how to live. Sound familiar? We often imagine dystopia as tyranny, but what if it's sedation? What if you're not being imprisoned by fear, but by pleasure? What if the freedom you think you have is only the freedom to distract yourself endlessly from what matters? You are not lost in pain, you are lost in pleasure. But pleasure without depth becomes anesthesia, and over time it becomes addiction, trauma, dissociation, and the roots of numbness. Now let's bring in the voice of Gabor Maté, whose work on trauma and addiction reframes distraction not as a moral failure, but a survival strategy. According to Maté, addiction, whether to substances or screens, is not about pleasure. It's about pain. The question is never why the addiction, it's always why the pain. If you experienced emotional neglect, if your authentic self was shamed, if your inner world was never seen or validated, then you learned early on to escape inward, to dissociate, to disconnect from the moment. Distraction is just dissociation wrapped in silicone. You scroll not because you're weak, but because at some point presence became too painful to bear. This pain becomes embedded in the nervous system. It becomes normalized. You stop noticing the disconnection. You just live through it, fragmented, numb, reactive. And the systems you live in, capitalist, consumerist, dopamine-fueled, don't want you to notice. Because a disconnected mind is a compliant one. An overstimulated psyche is easier to manipulate. A person too distracted to think is perfect for the machine. But here's the tragedy. The more disconnected you become, the less you remember who you really are. It doesn't happen all at once. One day, you notice your attention slipping. The next, your thoughts feel scattered. You can't finish a book. You open tabs you never return to. You begin a sentence and forget how it ends. Moments blur together. Nothing sticks. Everything feels thin, like reality is happening on the other side of a foggy window. And still you scroll. Distraction isn't just keeping you from focus. It's dismantling the architecture of your mind. Neuroplasticity and the erosion of attention. Your brain is not fixed, it's plastic, moldable. shaped by what you repeatedly do. This is the miracle of neuroplasticity and the curse of it, because when you live in a state of constant stimulation, your brain begins to rewire for that very state. Short bursts of dopamine, shallow rewards, fractured attention spans. Every time you multitask, switch tabs, check your phone mid-conversation, you're training your brain to expect fragmentation. You are not just distracted, you are becoming distraction. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for decision-making, emotional regulation, deep focus, atrophies under constant interruption. Meanwhile, the limbic system, your impulsive emotional center, grows louder. You are pulled by urges more than intention. Over time, this makes long-term goals feel unbearable, deep thought feels exhausting, and silence intolerable. This is not just a habit, it's neurochemical reprogramming. You're not bad at focusing. You are becoming neurologically dependent on not focusing. Loss of the inner world. But the consequences go deeper into the very core of selfhood. The more you consume, the less you create. The more you react, the less you reflect. The more you outsource your thinking, the less you know what you think. Soon, you begin to lose contact with your inner world, the rich, nuanced private world where meaning is made. The philosopher Søren Kierkegaard warned of this over a century ago. A man who as a physical being is always turned toward the outside, thinking that his happiness lies outside him, will turn inward only when he is forced to. But modern distraction keeps you forever turned outward, numb to yourself. And without self-contact, identity becomes fluid, performative. You begin to mimic instead of originate. Your preferences become algorithms, your voice an echo. You forget what it feels like to be you, unfiltered, unsupervised, unobserved. The weaponization of your attention. This fragmentation isn't accidental, it's engineered. Tech companies, media conglomerates, even self-help influencers, they all compete in the same economy, the attention economy. But attention isn't just a resource, it's your life force. What you give your attention to is your life. And if someone else controls your attention, they control your reality. This is why algorithms don't just show you what you like, they shape what you like. They steer your desires, influence your fears, engineer your beliefs, bit by bit, without consent, without awareness. Distraction becomes more than a habit, it becomes colonization, a quiet, invisible occupation of the mind. You think you're choosing what to watch. You're not. You're being guided, nudged, conditioned, and the worst part? The more distracted you are, the less you notice it. The hollowing of relationships. Distraction doesn't stop at the borders of the mind. It infects your relationships too. When you can't be present with yourself, you can't be fully present with another. You start checking your phone mid-conversation. You listen but don't hear. You nod but don't feel. Connection becomes transactional. Eye contact becomes rare. Intimacy becomes anxiety-inducing. Relationships, which once demanded presence, now suffer in its absence. We mistake constant connection for deep connection. But they are not the same. You might have hundreds of messages, thousands of interactions, yet feel utterly alone. And that loneliness breeds more distraction. The cycle tightens. You distract to escape the pain of disconnection. But the distraction deepens the very disconnection you're trying to escape. This is how people get lost. The societal fallout. Now zoom out. What happens when an entire society becomes addicted to distraction? Democracy weakens, reflection vanishes, critical thinking dies, populism rises. People no longer think in paragraphs, they think in headlines, memes, hot takes. Complexity is replaced with certainty. Echo chambers bloom. The average attention span is now shorter than that of a goldfish. Deep literacy, once the foundation of democracy, philosophy, and civil liberty, is eroding. Fewer people read, fewer people question, fewer people think. When a distracted population meets a manipulative system, you get a society that is technically free but mentally imprisoned. People vote out of fear, follow out of habit, outrage becomes currency, truth becomes relative. And underneath it all, quietly, invisibly, something sacred dies, the capacity to be with what is, to sit in silence, to think for oneself, to meet life without sedation. Distraction, Once a convenience becomes a cultural contagion, a psychic disease dressed in pixels and pushed as connection. What if your deepest power isn't your productivity, your intelligence, or your talent, but your ability to be fully here? Not reacting, not reaching, not running, just being. Most people will never reclaim this power, not because they're incapable, but because they've forgotten it exists. The world has trained you to escape yourself, and you've learned the art of escape so well, you've mistaken it for living. But here's the secret. You can choose presence, not as a one-time act, but as a rebellion. Because in a world engineered to distract you, the act of paying attention to your breath, to your pain, to your thoughts, to this very moment is nothing short of radical. First, stop trying to focus. The problem isn't that you lack focus. The problem is you've been focusing on the wrong things. You've tried productivity hacks, you've deleted apps, you've bought planners, installed blockers, watched motivational videos, but you're still stuck. That's because these are surface-level tools. They treat the symptom distraction as if it were the disease. But you're not distracted by accident. You're distracted because there's something inside you that doesn't want to feel, doesn't want to be here. Until you confront the root avoidance, every productivity trick will fail. Instead, start with awareness. Ask yourself, what am I running from? What is so uncomfortable about this moment? I'd rather escape it. What would happen if I stayed here, even just for a few minutes? This is how the rebellion begins. Not by trying to be more disciplined, but by being more honest. Unmask the system. To break free, you must name the enemy. And it's not just your phone, it's the story you've been sold about what your life is supposed to be. Aldous Huxley predicted this with terrifying clarity. We would be drowned not by fear, but by pleasure. Not by dictatorship, but by distraction. But you don't need to destroy your devices, you need to reclaim your sovereignty. Ask yourself, am I using this tool or is it using me? Is this moment dictated by my values or my dopamine? Who profits from my distraction? Start treating your attention like sacred currency. Guard it like your life depends on it, because it does. Not your physical life, your inner life. This is how you reclaim power, not by rejecting technology, but by refusing to let it own you. Ritualize presence. Here is a truth you won't hear in most self-help books. Presence isn't just a practice, it as a discipline, a ritual. It requires effort, friction, discomfort. And that's the point. You must train your nervous system to tolerate stillness again. Because right now, silence feels like withdrawal, like death. But it's not death, it's detox. Create sacred, tech-free spaces in your life. Not just digital detox weekends, but daily rituals. A phone-free morning with sunlight and breath. A walk without music. 5 minutes of sitting, just observing your thoughts, not fixing them. At first, you'll feel restless, bored, even anxious. That's the addiction screaming. Don't run from it, sit in it. Let the discomfort rise. This is how you reclaim your mind, not by numbing it, but by meeting it. Rebuild the inner world. When you stop outsourcing your stimulation, you start rebuilding something sacred, your inner world. Read philosophy. Write your thoughts. Journal not for content, but for clarity. Ask questions that have no answers. Explore your dreams. Reconnect with the voice inside you that isn't trying to perform or impress or be seen. Carl Jung called this individuation the process of becoming your true self. Not the persona, not the image, but the self that exists beneath conditioning, shame, fear. Distraction fragments the self, but reflection unites it. Your inner world can become a cathedral again, but you must enter it. You must choose it. Find the others. You weren't meant to do this alone. The distracted world is loud, but somewhere quietly there are others like you. People waking up, people asking deeper questions, people who no longer want to live on autopilot. Find them. Talk about real things. Share your fears. Discuss Nietzsche, Huxley, Jung, not for ego but for connection. Build circles that value stillness over speed, depth over dopamine, presence over performance. Because breaking free doesn't just require solitude, it requires solidarity. And together, presence becomes contagious. Reimagine your freedom. Here's the final shift. Stop seeing freedom as the absence of restriction. Start seeing it as the ability to choose what matters regardless of temptation. That's true freedom, to have the world at your fingertips and still choose stillness. To have endless stimulation, one tap away and say no, not out of deprivation, but out of devotion. Devotion to the moment, to depth, to becoming someone who can feel again. You don't need to abandon the world to escape distraction. You need to return to yourself fully. Imagine this. You're sitting in a quiet room. No notifications, no music, no background noise, just you, but something is wrong. Your chest feels tight. Your thoughts race. You itch to check your phone. You tell yourself it's nothing, but beneath the surface, a strange panic swells. What is this? This isn't boredom, this isn't inconvenience, this is withdrawal. You're not withdrawing from screens, you're withdrawing from yourself. And that is the truth you've been running from. The distraction was never the enemy. All along, you thought the problem was your phone, or social media, or the algorithm. And yes, those things are engineered to hijack your mind. But the reason they succeed, the reason they hook you, is far older than any app. Distraction is not your enemy, it's your shield, a defense mechanism, a brilliant unconscious strategy to keep you from feeling what you don't want to feel. The truth is, most people don't fear silence because it's empty. They fear silence because it's full of grief, regret, longing, shame, unprocessed memories, unanswered questions, and in a distracted world, none of that has to surface. You never have to sit with the pain of being misunderstood, the ache of your unlived life, or the whisper that you were meant for something more. But when the noise stops, when you stop running, that voice returns, and it asks, what have you become? Addiction to distraction is a spiritual crisis. This isn't just psychological, it's existential, it's spiritual. The philosopher Blaise Pascal once wrote, all of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone. Why? Because that silence confronts us with the raw, naked truth of existence, that we are finite, that we are uncertain, that meaning is not given, it must be created, and that deep down we are responsible for who we become. Distraction protects us from this truth. It gives us the illusion of progress even when we're stagnant, the illusion of connection even when we're alone, the illusion of knowledge even when we don't understand. But every illusion comes with a cost, and the cost is depth. You live wide but shallow, stimulated but empty, busy but lost. That is the quiet agony of the modern soul, the return to wholeness. So what happens when you stop running? What happens when you look the discomfort in the eye and say, I'm not leaving? You begin to remember. You remember that you once knew how to play for hours in silence, that you once stared at the stars without checking the time, that you once felt wonder in ordinary things, a leaf, a shadow, your own breath. You remember a version of you that wasn't fractured by scrolling, segmented by tabs, diluted by comparison. A version of you that was whole, not perfect, not polished, but present. And in that presence, something sacred returns. You begin to feel again, deeply, rawly, without buffering. You cry not because you're broken, but because you're finally here. You feel joy not because life changed, but because you did. You connect not through pings and likes, but through real, quiet, unfiltered moments. This isn't productivity. This isn't performance. This is being. And it is more radical than any revolution. The truth you were never meant to forget. All this time, you were not addicted to your phone. You were addicted to forgetting. Forgetting the pain, the confusion, the mess. But also, forgetting your aliveness. The deepest realization is not that distraction is bad. It's that the presence you seek is already inside you, beneath the anxiety, beneath the restlessness, beneath the urge to escape. There is a stillness, and inside that stillness lives everything you've been searching for. Clarity, connection, meaning, truth, self. It's not out there, it's not later, it's here now, always. But you have to choose it, and not once, but again and again, every moment, every day, every breath. That is the great rebellion, not to silence the world, but to awaken within it. Final words. So the next time you reach for your phone, pause. The next time you're bored, lonely, anxious, breathe. And the next time you're tempted to escape, ask yourself, what if this moment is the doorway back to yourself. Not the curated version, not the distracted one, but the real you. The one who's been waiting, the one who never left.